So here we go. We are being recorded. Welcome, welcome. Hello, everyone. You are tuning into Creatrix, and I have a couple of questions for you today. Have you ever felt like life has betrayed you? Experienced pain so deep that you might not ever recover? Have you ever lived with a feeling of brokenness inside and wondered, what is it all for? And what do I do next? And maybe you're looking for a trusted guide that has your back. Well, today's guest, Stacey Brown, is a must-have coach and mentor for you if you want to turn your pain into purpose or simply have a greater spiritual understanding of the happenings in your life. So again, welcome to Creatrix, where women become a powerful creatrix living in the matrix. I'm your host, Kat Moulton, coach, catalyst, and guide. And I help you remember who you really are, because the world needs women who are fully awake, dangerously alive, and unified in heart and purpose. Today's inspiring guest is the soulful and passionate Stacey Brown, who is fully awake, alive, and on purpose. Stacey is an intuitive healer, spiritual coach and mentor, empath, and author, and she helps you discover your life purpose. After trauma struck her family, she encountered some of the most profound spiritual experiences that changed her life, igniting her to give up her successful career in the beauty industry and dedicate her life to serving others through healing, coaching, mentoring, and her new book, Journey to Soul Center. Her goal is to help as many people as possible to achieve alignment in 4 bodies: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. So if you're going through upheaval or having a hard time finding the meaning in the pain, Stacey's got your back. Stacey, welcome to the show. I'm so delighted that you are here today.
Hi, Kat. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this interview for a while because I've read part of your book, not all of it, and I followed some of your story, getting to know you on Clubhouse the last couple of years. And I wanted to jump right in and ask you, based on the title of this, or it's the subtitle of your book, and we chose that for this episode, The Gifts of Surrender. I was wondering maybe if you'd share with us to start what surrender actually means to you.
So the best way for me to describe the word surrender is to tell the story of my surrender.
Okay.
I several years ago embarked on a journey with my husband at the time, in a spiritual process, and it was like a spiritual fast of sorts with a local church. And during that time, we made the choice for like 6 weeks, I think, to abstain from secular music and TV. And so I had found myself in the car on the way to the grocery store, and a time when I would normally be listening to music, I was listening to a podcast of a sermon.
Okay.
And the pastor was talking to his congregation, and he was talking about superheroes. And he said that, we see superheroes as these beings that have powers greater than ours, that can fly and can scale a building. And he's like, but what a real superhero is someone who gives up what they think their life is supposed to look like for whatever God has in store for them. And he said to the congregation, who wants to be a superhero, raise your hand. And I was in it. I was so in it. I raised my hand in the car driving down the road to the grocery store.
Oh, wow.
And as I pulled into the parking lot and parked the car, he said, if you want to be a superhero, do the following. Put your hands out, palms facing up, and say, I surrender, God, use me. I don't know why on that day I felt so connected to that process, but I know that at that very day, I made the decision to give up what I wanted my life to look like, or what I expected it to look like for whatever was in store for me. And it was just a couple weeks later that my son plummeted into some really significant issues. And I believe that there is great power in letting go of the outcome of whatever your life is supposed to be, like whatever processes you're going through. And so I
Yeah.
see surrender as a gift, because when you let go of the control of the outcome of your life, you make room for even greater things in what your higher power has for you.
Mm. That, I don't know, I feel like I'm speechless because this year, my word for the year is surrender. So that's partly my fascination with having you on the show. But I think that's really beautiful and powerful and really challenging for a lot of people too. That what you did to just put your hands out and surrender like that. I mean, that without like overthinking it, just doing that. It's challenging. It's challenging for me, right? And I know people that I've worked with, it's really hard to, what you said, let go and let go of the control. And it's almost like careful what you wish for or ask for, because then the things show up to give you the opportunities to do that. And it sounds like that's what happened with your son, that you had to really step into that prayer or that ask to let go. So is that accurate? I mean, I've only listened to part of the
Yeah,
story.
it upended my whole life.
Mhm.
I I thought I had my fairy tale. I had, reunited with my ex-husband, and we had remarried, and we had bought a beautiful home in the country,
Yeah.
and we were living the dream, in my opinion.
Mhm.
I was in the best physical shape of my life. I was running marathons. Um, I was spiritually connected and hadn't felt like I had been on the level that I was. Um, I was experiencing what I thought was like the beautiful happy ending that the stories from Disney gave you,
Mm.
like that's really what I thought.
Why did you think that? Were you like programmed to think that, this is the happy ending, this is the way it should be? Or
I
is it?
think I think part of it was programming, thinking that's how it should be, for sure. But
Mhm.
I really was aligned.
That's
Um,
awesome.
I believe that we have four bodies: our
Mhm.
mental, our emotional, our physical, and our spiritual.
Okay.
And in all four of those areas, I was in the healthiest space I had ever been. So
Mm.
to me, it was coming from within. I had the
Okay.
confidence of what I had done to like get in the physical shape that I had. Getting in the physical shape allowed me to go to a meditative state on a regular
Mhm.
basis running, which gave me time to process things and strengthen my
Right.
intuition. I mean, in all the ways, I felt like I had finally arrived.
Okay.
Um, but, that's when tragedy struck.
So for people who are not familiar with us, are you comfortable sharing a little bit about the trauma or the tragedy that struck and upended
Yeah,
everything?
absolutely. I would say the one thing I would want to say before I say anything is
Okay.
to lovingly give a trigger warning, just because,
Mm.
everybody handles trauma differently, and I don't
Yes.
want to upset anyone. But I'm a mom of four, and almost 4 years ago to the day, um, my son was 17 at the time, and he began to plummet into mental health and substance abuse issues.
Mhm.
And shortly after my surrender, he overdosed in our home. And 4 months after he recovered from that overdose, he attempted to take his own life by running his car into a tree at 100 miles an hour.
Wow.
Yeah. And I tell people that the day that he did that,
Mhm.
it was like he put the whole family in the car with him.
Right.
And we all came out with different injuries. Um,
Mm.
it was it was traumatic. It was um, terrifying, and I I didn't see it coming. But not only did I not see it coming, I immediately was in survival mode,
Mhm.
and all of my self care, all of my um, needs were put on the back burner, and I became completely absorbed in my son.
As a mom, I can appreciate that. I mean, I can only imagine like the magnitude of the heart-wrenching feelings that you were going through. I mean, I have 3 children and 2 stepchildren, and I just, to have that happen would be shocking and horrifying, and that you could lose your son. And you said, and I appreciate your vulnerability and your honesty, and that also that you let go of all these kind of self-care practices or these things that were keeping you in that um, healthy place. If you let go of all of those, Stacey, what got you through that time then? I mean, how did you?
I I don't know how else to say it, but I know it was my higher power. I know, and that for me is God. Um,
Mhm.
I was in the most unimaginable nightmare that I could be in, and yet during that time, I had some of the most powerful spiritual experiences I'll probably ever have. Profound things that got me to somehow hang on.
Would you be willing to share any of those with our listeners? And you don't have to.
Yeah, I would. So I talk about this. It's a chapter in my book. We, our son was in a medically induced coma, and when you're in a medically induced coma, the intention is to allow the brain to rest so it can heal. But the medication has to be eased up for short periods of time to allow the brain to be re-stimulated. And
Mhm.
so our son was on a ventilator and he had a trach, and they would wake him up for short periods of time. And though he couldn't speak, he could mouth things to us. And on one day we were there and they woke him for a period of time, and he asked to see the pastor of our church the next day. Like he wanted to see the pastor of the church. So we called the pastor, made the arrangements on the way home. We got into bed very late, and I don't remember falling asleep. I
Mhm.
feel like I was totally awake. Um, I remember like hearing my husband's breathing next to me. He was already asleep, and I had a vision. My son, fully healthy, came walking into my room. He was wearing a white baseball cap, a gray hoodie, his skinny
Mhm.
jeans, and his Nikes. And he sat on the edge of our bed, like at the foot of our bed. And he was like, "Mom, I don't know what to do because I've seen this." And he showed me that, like, pointed to the corner of my room, and there was this big, bright white light.
Oh, wow.
And on one side was my grandfather, and on the other side was my husband's grandfather. And he was like, then my son said, "And if I stay, I have a huge mess to clean up." And he looked at me,
Mhm.
and it was like he was asking me what to do. And I don't know how I was so calm, but I was like, it's not up to me.
Mm.
And then he was gone.
Oh, wow.
And I woke up the next morning and I was so calm. Like I just had like our son is in a coma in the hospital. He has a machine doing the breathing for him, and I'm calm, right? It
Mhm.
was bizarre. And my husband woke up and I was like, I have to share with you. Like we were getting ready to go to the hospital. And I was like, I have to share with you. As soon as I woke up, and he collapsed to his knees and he was like, oh my God, he's going to die. Like
Mm.
he asked to see the pastor of the church. He's going to die. Like, so he's racing to get ready to the hospital, and we're on our way to the hospital, and we get out of the parking garage and we're walking towards the hospital, and I can hear my son's voice, and he's like, Mom, send dad in and have him ask me. Like, I will tell him, I will confirm I was there. And I thought, I'm crazy. I'm losing my mind. And we went in and I said, Mike, you have to go in. You have to do this. Like go in and ask him. And he went in, and I stood with the pastor and his wife, and he went in by himself, and he came out about 20 minutes later with tears streaming down his face. And he was like, I asked him in two different ways, and he confirmed he was in our room. And I was like, I told you,
Wow.
I told you. So we went home again that night, got into bed, and the phone rang right as we were getting into bed, and it was the hospital. And the nurse was like, everything's okay. But we woke Dylan for a period of time, and he insisted that we call you. And the only thing he keeps saying is the same phrase over and over again: I was upstairs. I was upstairs. I was
Oh,
upstairs.
wow.
Because of that vision,
Hmm.
that whatever that incredible experience was, I became so calm in whatever the outcome was going to be,
Okay.
because I had had such a deep experience that I would never have expected.
Mm.
It shifted so much for me because I knew that he was going to be at peace either way.
That's going to be a powerful feeling in such a traumatic and tragic moment to know, like, it sounds like you knew in your core he would be at peace regardless of
Mhm,
what the outcome was.
mhm.
Um, did that give you then a lot of peace because you said you were calm, or did you still struggle with?
I still struggled deeply with like the medical part of things, the
Mhm.
physical part of things, the advocating with the doctors and the nurses. I was deeply struggling, deeply,
Okay.
deeply struggling. But spiritually, I was in a very significantly elevated space.
Okay.
So the stress of the day to day was
Hmm.
very heavy. Um,
Hmm.
but I was given the gift of like a deeper peace, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think that's great for me to hear, and hopefully the listeners, that that connection that you had brought that deeper peace, and you weren't actually trying to do anything to make it happen. It
Mhm.
sounds like in that surrender prayer, or offering or letting go that you made weeks before, that just kind of ushered in that peace for you, and you weren't doing, you were just being in it.
Mhm.
um, which is really beautiful. And also for someone like myself who struggled with the concept of spirituality, like, could that really be possible? And so hearing like your testament and your story to that is, it reaffirms that it can be. And I wanted to ask you, is that when you shared that story of your son coming into your bedroom and seeing the light and your grandfather's, was that one of the things that really, I guess, maybe solidified your faith in some of the spiritual stuff, being able to witness
So
that?
I've always had a very deep faith.
Okay.
I have gone through some significant religious indoctrination, confusion, and transition from religion.
Hmm.
But religion and spirituality are very different from each other. And I would say
Right.
I've always been a spiritual being. I've always been intuitive. I've always known things. I've always sensed
Hmm.
things. Um, I have tried for many years to shut it out, because I didn't want to feel the
Hmm.
things I was feeling.
Right.
But I had already been going through a deep spiritual process before all of this happened with my
Okay.
son. But when this happened with my son, there are some other stories that I share in the book that
Hmm.
I had intuitive hits that actually saved his life, where
That's
like the
awesome.
doctors didn't know it was wrong, and
Hmm.
I knew. And um because of those things, it was a deeper dive into my spirituality.
Okay.
I had spent a lot of time trying to fit in a church, or fit in like a organization, and I really had a heart for like women's ministry. I really wanted,
Hmm.
but I
Okay.
never found that my intuitive abilities were accepted in a church setting. And so that was when I started kind of exploring um, oracle cards and doing readings for people and using my gifts in a way that felt comfortable for me.
Okay. I want to expand upon that in just a second, but first, would you mind sharing, like, how things turned out for your son before
Oh, of course. Yeah.
for anybody that's like waiting or wanting to know, or maybe they could just get the book too, but
Yeah. So my son is doing really well.
that's awesome.
He just celebrated 2 years of sobriety.
Mhm.
He lives down south in nice warm weather, and
Ooh.
he lives by the beach, and he is in constant service to people who are struggling with mental health and substance abuse issues. He
Mhm.
works for an addiction center, and he's doing really well.
Oh, I'm glad. And I'm glad to hear that that was the outcome, that he's doing well, but it also sounds like he was a catalyst for you in in your process. And um, in your process, you already kind of answered one of the questions I was going to ask you is if you could, what is your definition of spirituality? And how do you define that? Because you talked about your gifts and it is different than religion, yet you are affiliated or were affiliated with a church. Can you share some of your views on that for us?
I think spirituality is the connection that you have with source, like how you
Mm.
connect with source, and the practice of, like, religion is the practice of the feeling of spirituality, but I believe spirituality is your connection with your higher power in the world around you.
That's
And I
awesome.
think in this world we overcomplicate it so much. We
Mm.
overcomplicate it so much. It comes down to us, like, existing in a space of love, period, end of sentence, knowing
Mm.
that we're all connected. Yeah. And so I made a decision at a certain point to um, walk away from the idea that I was going to fit into a religious sect. And
Okay.
instead, I decided to focus more on my spirituality and my connection with source. And as I did that, I started using different modalities
Mhm.
to find what fit for me.
Is there anything right now that fits for you that you work with for yourself or with your clients?
Yeah, so I am really passionate about oracle cards. I love oracle cards. I feel the messages are so profound and life changing. And
Mhm.
I love Reiki. I'm a certified Reiki practitioner, and I really believe in the power of Reiki healing. It was one of the modalities that kind of opened me up a little bit more in my intuitive muscle. And
Okay.
um, it's such a loving and meditative practice that I try to incorporate it where I can.
Awesome. So when you do you incorporate it with your clients when you work with them then
I
as
do.
well as these? Yeah.
I do. Yeah.
If someone were interested in working with you, what would they come to you for then? Just, just this deep pain? Is it just expanding their spirituality? Like what kind of
So
guidance do you offer?
I would say there's a couple of different avenues. So the first one is I do a beautiful mentorship program. It's
Okay.
12 weeks. It's a deep dive into actionable steps. Okay. So
Mhm.
daily actionable steps to take you on a journey to acknowledging all four of those bodies, like I was talking about earlier: mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual, and to go deep dive into the self love journey
Mhm.
to understand what your gifts are and how you're going to use them in the world.
Okay.
So basically, the program is to awaken you to your soul's purpose. And
Nice.
it's an amazing thing that I get to do with my friend Namesh. Um, I also do
Hmm.
it individually. So that's
Okay.
one avenue. I incorporate Reiki into that, but I also do Reiki healing.
Mhm.
And I do oracle card readings. And so I would say if someone is in a space where they know that they're meant for more, but they're not quite sure how to get there,
Mhm.
come to me. I would
Okay.
say if somebody is in a season of transition and it's uncomfortable and they don't know how to get their footing, they come to me.
Nice.
So I would say I I can be used for a multitude of reasons, but I will tell you, yesterday I had a really profound experience where um, I had a client come to me who recently lost her husband, and
Ooh.
we were supposed to be on a session for something completely different. And I ended up doing a reading for her and connecting her with her husband and helping her release some things that have been holding her back. And so it was like an unexpected way for me to serve.
Mhm.
So I would say I'm able to dial in on what your soul needs.
Okay. I love that. And it sounds like it's a combination from listening to you and some of the research that I did that you can dial into what someone's soul needs by your intuitive gifts, by like that love and compassion and that ability to surrender, but also what you've been through personally. And I know there's a lot more in the book, yourself and then with your son and your family. Like it sounds like you're very relatable to the average person or to someone who's gone through some traumatic experience and maybe feels broken or lost. So do you find, I know you use all these gifts and these tools, do you find it's helpful for people to be able to talk about it and express it, or does that get in the way sometimes?
So
What
I
do you,
think I think talking is great. I mean I feel like that's how we grow and we learn is our
mm,
interactions with each other. But I would say
okay,
that there's something even more powerful than that, in my opinion, and it has been
okay,
my journey, and that's
please
journaling.
share.
That's journaling.
Mm,
And the
okay,
thing is that a lot of people dismiss journaling because they dump words on a page and then they close the journal and they don't feel any better, right? Or they sit down
mm,
and they don't know what to write. And
okay.
that's one of the things that I help people do. I have been journaling since I was like probably 10, 11, and I used to just dump words on a page. And I
Okay.
never felt like it was, I loved journaling because I loved the writing, but I couldn't figure out like, how can I make this practice make me feel good when I'm done? And so I developed a journaling technique that I teach people, and I've taught hundreds of people. And it's powerful. It's a way to
Mhm.
shift what you're doing with your journaling so that when you finish the process, you have like a positive or a healthy outcome.
Awesome.
And I personally feel talking is great, but when someone really has a lot to process, I think there's great power in writing.
I agree. I do think there's great power in writing, and we overlook it sometimes for some of the reasons that you shared. It is a great tool. I love to know that you use that as well for yourself and your clients. Do you find that journaling helps people get in touch with what their gifts possibly are if they're struggling and don't know what their gifts are and they want to know?
I
Mm,
think journaling is an avenue for that, yes.
okay.
But I feel like we overcomplicate figuring out what our gifts are. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
When we're little kids, we are so open to whatever the world has for us. We let
Mm,
our imagination run free. We 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 believe we can be anything, right? I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a teacher. I want to be a doctor. And no one's going to tell us that we can't do it.
right.
I feel like as adults, we have to go back to that childlike mentality,
Hmm.
and we've got to explore different modalities to
Yeah.
find what works for us. I
Hmm.
tell people often that when they work with me, it's like I walk them up to a buffet,
Hmm.
all different ingredients to make a soup. Okay. And I show them what my soup recipe is. I show them like I love cilantro in mine. I love a little onion, like, right? A little self love, a little journaling, a little meditation, right? That's what I do.
Okay.
And then I say to them, now you get to take the recipe and you get to cultivate the flavors that you want in order to have the soup you want. And if you
Hmm.
think about it, when we are growing up, we're raised on one soup recipe, and that's the soup recipe that our parents passed down from their parents, right?
Hmm.
We don't we don't, in my opinion, at least with what I've seen with my clients, a lot of times we don't recognize that there's other ingredients out there, that we can use a pendulum, that we can use oracle cards, that we can use Reiki, that we can use yoga. We don't
Hmm.
know all of those things are ingredients that we can put into our soup and cultivate the recipe that we want. And
Mhm.
so what I love to do with people is walk them up to the buffet and say, here are all the options that you have for ways to connect yourself spiritually. Now, what do you want to do for you? Because for
Mm,
some people, journaling is a powerful tool, right? They use it every
right.
day. They feel very insightful when they're done, very positive, and they're committed to it. Other people need to meditate for 30 minutes a day. They can't miss it. But
Mhm.
what I do is take you through the process of exploring what's going to work for you.
I really appreciate that, Stacey, because my belief is that there's no one right path and no one right way. And you mentioned like in our families, we just have this one recipe. But I find that even sometimes in certain religious areas and even just spiritual areas that aren't even religious, that they still have one paradigm or one right way. And you have to do it this way because this is what worked for me. But it might not be true. It doesn't mean those ways don't work, but it might not work for those a different individual, so that you present all kinds of options, I think is really beautiful and help people become empowered to see what works for them, what connects them to source, the best way for them. Do you find that at different points in our life too, it could change and different
100%.
things? Yeah.
100%. Because I mean, I've had times where, I've leaned really heavily into Reiki because I've had more clients and I've felt more, connected in that space. And I've felt the need and the draw to more Reiki. Then I've had
Hmm.
other times in my life where, the power of journaling is enhanced, right? But
Hmm.
that's the beauty of it, is that we get to
Right.
alter the recipe however we want. And if you think about it like a soup, right? We know not everybody has the same
Hmm.
food palette, right?
Right.
The same taste buds. We all taste
Hmm.
food differently. Some of us
Right.
love cilantro and some of us think it tastes like soap, right? So how could the recipe be the same if we all have a different taste?
Right.
And so if we think about it like that, you're right. Everybody is going to be different in what they need. Number 1, number 2, those needs are going to change because the
Hmm.
things that you liked to eat when you were 7 are not, I'm guessing, the same thing you like to eat when you're 40, right? It's different.
Right.
And so our
Yeah.
taste buds evolve and change. And so I think this is super important, super important because
No pun intended.
because when we dial it down to a basic concept like this, like a recipe, it really does make so much sense. And I think we overcomplicate it because we
Yeah.
think that there's only one way, and
Yeah.
we debate. And yet, how can there be only one way when we're all so different?
Right. No, I agree. And I think that's where that, like your compassion comes in and the things that you've been through come in because you've experienced different ways in your life and you bring that to the table. And it sounds like you really honor the individual and what they've experienced as well, which is such a beautiful thing. Um, we, we've been going for a while. We're going to have to wrap up. I could ask you thousands more questions. If if someone wants to know more about you and about these concepts or about what you've been through and how you overcame it, where can they find you? And remind us of the name of your book.
Okay, so my book is called Journey to Soul Center:
Okay.
Discovering the Gift of Surrender. It's available on Audible and Amazon. Really excited to even be able to say that because it was such a process.
Awesome.
I have a website, stacy-brown.com. If you want to connect there, there's the link to buy my book. There's information for people who are interested in mentorship. I do a discovery call for free. You can set up for a free discovery call to explore if mentorship is right for you. I also have information on there about my Oracle card readings and some of the other work that I do. I can be found on Instagram at Stacey Brown 555, and I'm on Facebook, Stacey Brown, and I'm on Clubhouse. I have a club on Clubhouse called Soul Center, and it's a great space to connect. I do rooms multiple times a week there in that space.
That's awesome. I've been into a couple of your rooms and they are powerful. So if you guys need some guidance, check out Stacey. Her website and some of the links will be in the show notes, and I'll put them in the Facebook live below so people can access them. I have 2 more questions before we go. I want to honor your time. The title is The Gifts of Surrendering, and that's the subtitle of your book. When you were able to let go of the learnings of your childhood and the expectations that you had for yourself, or how you just visioned your life when it was the happiest, when you're able to let go of that and begin to surrender, what is like the most profound gift out of that for yourself?
I would say the biggest gift for me in this process has been a deeper love and understanding of who I am and why I'm here.
That's beautiful. And it sounds like you've found your purpose and you can help other people do that. In that thread, what do you want your lasting legacy to be, Stacey?
I want my legacy to be that I turned my pain into purpose and that I helped as many people as I could.
I love that. And I think I've seen the work that you're doing in the world, and you are on track to do that. You're already doing it. You're just going to keep doing more of it. So I'm really honored that you took some time to speak with us today. Is there anything you want to share with us before we wrap that
I
maybe
just
we
want to
haven't
thank
touched on?
you. Thank you for having me. This has been a pleasure. I love spending time with you, Kat.
No, it's been an honor and a pleasure for me too, Stacey. Your work is beautiful. Your story is really touching and I think inspiring to other people. So if they pick up the book, they'll be in for a treat. Thank you all for being here with Stacey and I today. We appreciate your time, energy, and presence if you've gotten to the end of the episode. And hopefully you've extracted some gems or wisdom for yourself. So from my heart to yours, may the energy of love flow through and expand to create waves of pure positive impact in the world. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.